In the courtroom, I sat alone. No lawyer next to me. My mom and brother were already smiling like they'd won. They thought I was broke, beaten, done. Then, the judge called my name, and a voice from the back said, "Your Honor, counsel for the respondent." That's the moment my family realized I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the trap. My name is Danielle. I'm 39 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polish. It hit me the second I walked in, that dry, tired scent that lives in files older than everyone in the room. There was a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the thermostat. That kind of cold, quiet air you only find in courthouses and funeral homes, places where people come to lose something, or pretend they are not losing it. The benches were polished but scarred, groaning softly when anyone shifted their weight, as if they had heard too many stories and were tired of carrying them. Thick carpet ran down the aisles, a dull, institutional blue that muted every step like it was hiding something under the surface, swallowing the sound of shoes, secrets, and second thoughts. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting the whole room in that flat, unforgiving brightness that makes everyone look a little more guilty. The seal of the state hung above the judge's bench, heavy and official, watching us all. To my left, the clerk shuffled papers in calm, practiced movements. To my right, the court reporter sat ready, eyes sharp, fingers resting on the machine, prepared to turn every word into a permanent record. Somewhere behind me, the door had clicked shut when I came in, and that sound still echoed in my chest. It felt like the world outside had sealed off, and all that remained was this room, these people, this fight. My family sat on the right side. My mother in her tailored coat, my brother Marcus in a suit that was just a little too flashy for a probate hearing, and his wife Olivia with her hair perfectly curled, phone tucked away for once. They had chosen the middle row, not too close to the front, not too far back, right where everyone could see them when they turned around. They didn't whisper. Not at first. They didn't need to. Their silence said enough. They just sat there, like winners. Marcus had his arm stretched along the back of the bench, fingers draped behind Mom's shoulder, looking relaxed, like this was an errand he was checking off before lunch. He adjusted his cufflinks now and then, a tiny show of control. Mom wore that burgundy scarf she always saves for important days. The fabric caught the light when she moved, deep and rich, like dried blood. The same scarf she wore when she took me off the deed to our father's house. I remember staring at it that day too, while my name disappeared from paper, thinking how something soft could be wrapped around something so cold. Olivia had crossed her legs neatly, skirt smoothed, hands folded on top of a structured handbag that probably cost more than my last mortgage payment. She kept her face neutral, the way people do when they know which side they are on and believe it is the right one. If you walked in without context, you would have thought they were a family attending a graduation ceremony. Confident, collected, certain that the day would end with something going in their favor. I sat on the opposite side, alone. The entire row behind me was empty, just worn wood and quiet. No papers in my lap. No lawyer beside me flipping through documents or whispering strategy. No briefcase, no binder, no one to lean on or perform concern for others to see. My hands rested in my lap, fingers loosely intertwined, my purse pushed against my hip. To anyone watching, I looked like the one who had already lost, the one who came to accept it. The truth was, I had rehearsed this moment so many nights I had lost count. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, laptop open, scrolling through legal forums, reading stranger stories, highlighting lines and printouts until the ink bled through the page. I knew how I must look. A woman who was outnumbered, outlawyered, and outfunded. That was fine. They were counting on that. Aunt Carla leaned over to Mom, her perfume drifting across the aisle, heavy and sweet, the same one she wore at every family gathering. Her bangles chimed together when she moved her arm, that soft clink that had always announced her presence before she entered a room. She lowered her voice in that stage whisper people use when they want to be overheard. She couldn't even afford a lawyer? The words floated in the air, sharp and coated in sugar. Mom's lips curved. She didn't bother denying it. She tilted her head just enough toward Carla and let out a small, delighted laugh. "What did I tell you?" she murmured, amusement warming her tone. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew the script. The irresponsible daughter. The dramatic one. The one who never understood how the world really works. The one who should have been grateful for whatever scraps she got. They all smiled like it was over. Like this hearing was just a formality, a rubber stamp on my loss before they headed to brunch. Marcus leaned back again, comfortable in his certainty. Olivia glanced around, eyes lingering on the judge's bench, on the flag, on me, then back to her hands. Mom adjusted her scarf, smoothing it down with satisfaction. They had written the ending in their heads long before this day. I didn't flinch, didn't turn to look. My face stayed calm, my gaze fixed on the front of the courtroom. I counted the grooves in the wooden rail in front of me, the tiny dents where other people's rings had knocked against it. I tracked my breathing. In, out, in, out. My hands were folded in my lap, palms warm against each other, but inside, it was different. Inside, I felt the stillness of a storm that knew exactly when to break. Not the wild chaos of a sudden thunderclap, but the heavy electric pause right before, the part where the sky holds its breath, where everything feels too quiet, too still, and you just know something is coming. That was the space I lived in now. Not rage, not panic. Just an assurance that I had not shown my full hand yet. The judge called my name. Danielle Caldwell. I stood. The bench creaked beneath me. My knees did not. I smoothed the front of my blazer out of habit, feeling the familiar tug of the fabric, the seams I had reinforced myself when the original thread began to fray. I could feel every eye in the room shift, curiosity prickling at the back of my neck. The judge looked up, eyes skimming the courtroom, probably noticing the imbalance. One woman alone on one side, a neat little cluster of family on the other, and just before I opened my mouth, a voice echoed from the back. Your Honor, counsel for the respondent. The sound cut clean through the room. Chairs shifted, heads turned toward the doors. For a second, even the fluorescent hum seemed to dim. I felt, more than saw, my family react, a ripple of surprise moving through their row. A man in a charcoal gray suit stepped forward from the back, his tie neatly pinned, his steps unhurried. He walked like he owned his pace, like the minutes in this room belonged to him. His hair was threaded with a little gray at the temples, not enough to make him old, just enough to make him look like someone who had seen a lot and lost very little. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. We had already done all our looking, in offices and over documents and across conference tables. He already knew. I had hired him 6 months ago, quietly, long before today's date was ever set on the docket. And no, I didn't pick his name off Google after a late-night spiral. I found him through a retired judge my old friend knew, someone whose mother's furnace had died in the middle of a Detroit winter years ago. I climbed 3 flights of icy stairs that night with my tool bag, shoulders burning from the weight, breath fogging in front of me. Their apartment had been freezing, her mother wrapped in 2 blankets, hands trembling as she held a chipped mug of tea. I crawled into that grimy basement, fingers numb, breath stinging my lungs, and I fixed that HVAC with parts I could have charged for, but did not. When the heat kicked back on, her mother cried. The retired judge, back then still on the bench, had stood in the doorway and watched me work. When I tried to hand her the invoice, she shook her head. If you ever need someone who doesn't flinch in court, she said, her voice low, eyes steady on mine, call Peter Laskin. At the time, I had laughed, wiping furnace dust from my arms. Courtrooms were not part of my world. Bills were, service calls were, my father's medications were. I pocketed the name anyway, scribbling it on the back of an old receipt and tucking it into my wallet. I had no idea I was storing ammunition. So, when my world shifted after my father's funeral, after the papers I never signed somehow rewrote my name out of his home, I took that receipt out. The ink was faded, the paper worn soft, but the name was clear. I called Peter. His assistant put me on hold. My heart pounded while a cheap jazz version of a pop song played in my ear. When he finally came on, his voice was calm, measured. He listened more than he spoke. When I finished my story, there was a pause, then a simple sentence. All right, he said. We can work with this. We met in his office downtown. No fancy building, no glass wall overlooking the river. Just a solid, practical space with shelves full of casebooks and a coffee machine that hissed every 30 minutes. I told him I could not pay the full retainer up front. He nodded, unbothered, and laid out a plan. I paid in monthly installments, money pulled straight from extra shifts and side jobs. I signed every affidavit myself, sitting at my kitchen table with the TV off, reading every line until the words blurred. I mailed them USPS certified, standing in line at the post office while other people sent birthday cards and Amazon returns. While my mother and brother were on vacation in Nashville, posting photos of neon signs and hot chicken and laughing in tourist bars, I was filing paperwork at the Wayne County Courthouse, my fingers ink-stained from stamps and signatures. While they were splitting up Dad's garage tools, deciding who got the good drill and who got the old lawnmower, I was getting every signature notarized, sitting across from strangers with official stamps who glanced at my ID and watched me sign my name like it might be for the last time. Peter walked up to the front now, gave the judge a respectful nod, then opened his leather folder with practiced ease. The sound of the clasp releasing seemed louder than it should have been. He spoke clearly, every word landing with precision. Your Honor, I'd like to begin by submitting Exhibit A. The amended deed transfer dated May 16, 2009, notarized and recorded with the Wayne County Clerk's office. The judge glanced at it, then motioned to the clerk. The clerk walked it over to the bench, heels whispering against the carpet, sleeves brushing the edge of the desk as she set the document down. The moment that paper hit the wood, I saw Marcus's posture change. He sat up. The lazy sprawl disappeared. His arm came off the bench, his fingers laced together in front of him, knuckles pressing against each other. The easy smile he had been wearing faded, just a little, the corners tightening. Peter did not stop. He flipped to the next document, already prepared. Exhibit B is the video deposition of Mr. Arthur Caldwell, contractor present during the 2009 renovation, and a legal witness to the original co-ownership agreement. Arthur. The name fluttered something open in my chest. I saw him in my mind, standing in our unfinished kitchen with dust in his hair, laughing with my dad about football while Tile leaned against the wall. Olivia's mouth parted slightly, just a fraction, like she was trying to remember who Arthur was. As if he had been just another worker who came and went, faceless and forgettable. I remembered. Arthur was the man who laid the tile in the downstairs bathroom, kneeling on sore knees for hours, radio playing quietly in the background. The man who toasted my dad's birthday with us that summer, holding a red plastic cup in his rough hands while he stood near the grill. The one who shook both our hands when we agreed, in front of him, that I would co-own the house as part of caring for Dad when his health turned. He had looked me in the eye and said, "It's good you're doing this. Not everyone shows up." He never knew how much that sentence would matter. Peter placed the USB on the clerk's tray like he was setting down a grenade, small and unassuming but capable of blowing holes in their story. Then he stepped back, posture relaxed but focus razor sharp. The room stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air has weight. Somewhere behind us, someone shifted, fabric whispering against fabric. The court reporter's keys clicked faintly as she tagged the exhibits. The only other sounds were the soft flip of papers and the distant tap of shoes on tile in the hallway outside. Mom did not smile anymore. Her lips had thinned, pressed together so tightly the lipstick line had blurred. She held her scarf with one hand now, fingers twisting the edge of the fabric. Marcus looked at me then, just for a second. His eyes met mine across the aisle, searching for the panic he expected to find. I looked back, without blinking. You see, this was never just about the house, the square footage, the brick, the mortgage. This was about being erased, about being written out of the story I had bled to keep going, about being the one who took Dad to dialysis while they went to dinner, nodding along to live music, posting photos of cocktails, the one who sat in waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and fear, holding a paper cup of water for him when his throat went dry, the one who used her own credit to pay off the second mortgage so they wouldn't lose the house after his stroke, signing lines that would haunt my bank account for years. Then, the week after the funeral, when the flowers were still wilting in vases and sympathy cards were still on the mantel, Marcus walked in with a notary. They were both in collared shirts, paperwork neatly stacked. He cleared his throat like he was about to offer me help, not strip me of something. "It's better if it's in one name," he said. "Cleaner for the taxes." He said it like it was a favor. Like I was being rescued from complexity I could not possibly understand. I was still wearing black. There was still a sympathy casserole in the fridge. I remember staring at the pen he handed me, then at the notary's seal, then at Mom, who would not quite meet my eyes. They filed paperwork behind my back anyway, reshaping reality with signatures I never gave. When I pushed back, Mom called me dramatic, said I was making a scene, said I was letting grief make me paranoid. Olivia stopped replying to texts, little speech bubbles left hanging and then gone. The family group chat went silent, my messages sitting there with no responses, like I had been muted, not just on their phones but in their minds. Thanksgiving invite. "Oh, I thought you were with your friends this year," Mom said, voice all innocence. Then, that Facebook post, a photo of the three of them on the porch, my father's porch, with the caption, "The only ones who showed up when it mattered." They rewrote the story in front of everyone, cast themselves as the faithful, cast me as the absentee, the unreliable one, the outsider. But I did not explode, did not fire off paragraphs in the comments, did not post screenshots or air dirty laundry for strangers to pick apart. I did not beg. I saved every message. I screenshotted every bank transfer. I printed every receipt. I studied. I filed. I waited. And now, here we were, all of us in the same room again. Only this time, there were rules, and records, and someone at my side who knew how to use both. "Mr. Laskin, is there additional evidence?" the judge asked, voice steady but eyes more focused now. "Yes, Your Honor," Peter replied. He reached into the folder again, no rush, no flourish. "Exhibit C bank statements showing all mortgage payments made from Ms. Caldwell's account between 2009 and 2022, along with receipts for property tax and utilities solely in her name." The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly as he glanced over the pages. That small movement was everything. It meant something here did not match the story he had expected. Marcus leaned forward, whispering to Olivia, his lips moving quickly. She did not answer. Her eyes stayed on the table in front of them, jaw tight. Mom crossed her arms, pulling her scarf tighter around her shoulders, like she was cold. I was not. I had not been in a long time. I had already walked through the cold years ago, sat alone in hospital corridors, stood in basements fixing furnaces that were not mine, spent nights hunched over bills and forms while my phone stayed dark. Whatever they could throw at me now, I had already faced the worst of it in the quiet. See, the thing about betrayal is, it does not freeze you. Not if you survive the first wave. It burns, quietly. It eats through the walls you thought would always stand, one slow ember at a time. It turns you into someone who studies fine print and reads every line twice, into someone who learns how to speak the language of banks and clerks supervisors, into someone who starts recording dates and names and keeping copies of everything. And by the time they notice the smoke, by the time they smell it and finally look up from their comfort and their assumptions, you have already rebuilt the foundation. Not the same house, Not the same trust, something stronger, something that does not depend on them believing your story to be true. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The thing about silence is that it unsettles people more than shouting ever could. Shouting gives people a target. Silence gives them a mirror. Peter didn't need to raise his voice. He never did. In that courtroom, he let the documents speak. The folders on his table were thin, unassuming, but I knew what they carried. Each exhibit was a story they thought would stay buried in family memory. Every page exposed what they had done while smiling in my face and telling me it was better this way. The judge turned a few pages, the sound of paper soft but sharp in the quiet room. His eyes moved down a paragraph, then up toward my brother. Mr. Caldwell, do you have any response to the deed transfer in Exhibit A? Marcus blinked, like the spotlight had come sooner than he expected. His head turned automatically to Mom. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "Go on, stick to the plan." He stood, fingers tugging at his tie, clearing his throat. Yeah, Your Honor. That deed was... We thought it was outdated. We didn't know it was still active." The excuse hung in the air, thin as dust. No mention of the conversations in the kitchen. No mention of promises made over my father's hospital bed. Just, we thought. Peter didn't move. He didn't rush to challenge it. He just waited, hands resting lightly on the podium, eyes steady on the bench. He knew what was in the record. "The county records show it was never revoked," the judge said, tapping the page with one finger. "And your signature is on the original agreement." I saw Marcus's jaw tighten. "We just assumed..." "Mr. Caldwell," the judge cut in, voice still calm but firmer now. "Assumptions do not override recorded legal documents." That was the first crack. You could feel it. The confidence in their row dropped a few degrees. Olivia looked down at her lap, thumb going to her mouth, worrying the edge of a polished nail. Mom shifted in her seat, the burgundy scarf that had looked so bold earlier now a little too bright against her skin. Her hand went to the fabric, twisting it once, then smoothing it flat again. I didn't say a word. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingers laced the same way they'd been when I walked in. My heart beat steady. My breathing stayed even. I let the silence do what it does best. Because I didn't need them to admit guilt. I had already buried that hope. I only needed the court to see the truth. And the truth had paper trails. Dates, signatures, bank routing numbers, certified mail receipts with my name and theirs printed in unforgiving ink. "Your Honor," Peter said, stepping forward just a little. "We also have text message records and voicemails in which the respondent's family pressures her to sign off quietly, in exchange for what they called peace." He lifted a printed packet from his folder and handed it to the clerk. I knew those pages by heart. I had scrolled through them in the dark more times than I could count, thumb hovering over the delete button and stopping short every time. "These were submitted under affidavit by Miss Caldwell last month," he said. The judge took the packet and read. His eyes moved line by line, no visible reaction, but the room seemed to get smaller around us. I remembered every word he was seeing now. "Stop stirring this up. You're going to regret making this ugly. Marcus is in charge now. If you want peace, just sign." "Ms. Caldwell Sr.," the judge said, looking to my mother. "Did you send this message on March 2nd? She didn't answer right away. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The muscles in her jaw flexed. The courtroom felt like it leaned in. "I was trying to keep things from getting ugly," she said finally. "We didn't want drama." Same tone she always used, reasonable, soft, a tone that implied the real problem was my reaction, not her action. "Yet the message reads," the judge said, glancing back down. "If you keep stirring this up, you'll regret it. Marcus is in charge now." He read it flat. No judgment in his voice. He didn't need to add any. Mom's eyes flicked to Marcus, quick and sharp. He stared at the table in front of him. She looked away, focus drifting somewhere past the judge's shoulder, the way people do when they're trying to walk out of a moment without moving their feet. Peter had done more than gather evidence. He had laid a path of facts, one after another, and they had followed it to this point themselves. All he did now was hold up the map. Watching them under those fluorescent lights, I slipped back for a moment to the first time their silence really swallowed me. Right after Dad passed, when the phone stopped ringing and the casserole dishes had all been picked up. The house was too quiet. The TV remote sat untouched. His recliner still had the faint shape of his body in the cushions. I went to his closet because movement felt better than sitting. Shirts still smelled like his cologne. On the top shelf, my hand brushed cardboard. I pulled down a yellow Sears shoebox, edges worn soft. Across the lid, in thick black marker, he'd written, "Danielle's half." The words looked almost clumsy, letters leaning into each other. But there was nothing uncertain about them. Inside were receipts and copies. Mortgage payments with my name on them, deposit slips, bank printouts with little notes in his messy handwriting. Dee paid this one. She covered it, her half. Paper that said, in his own way, "I see what you're doing. It counts." I sat on his bed with that box in my lap and felt something steady drop into place. I wasn't imagining my contribution. It wasn't just helping out. It was documented. I brought that box to Peter. It sat between us on his desk, small and plain. He opened it carefully, took his time with each page. When he finished, he closed the lid and rested his hands on top of it for a moment. "They're going to regret underestimating you," he said. No smile, no gloating. Just a simple statement, like reading a measurement off a tape. Now, in that courtroom, watching my brother fumble through excuses and my mother shrink a little under her own words, I felt that sentence replay in my head. Not as a threat, as a confirmation. I didn't feel revenge. That's loud, hot, messy. I didn't feel pride either, not the kind that makes you want to stand up and shout. What I felt was quieter. I felt proof. Proof that I hadn't made it up, that I wasn't crazy, that when they closed ranks and wrote me out, it wasn't just a misunderstanding or a communication issue. What they did was real. The betrayal was real. And now, so were the consequences. Peter stepped back to the podium. Lastly, Your Honor, he said, we request that co-ownership be reinstated effective immediately, and that the court recognize Ms. Caldwell's 13-year financial contribution toward the home's equity. 13 years. It sounded like a sentence and a lifetime at the same time. 13 years of checks, transfers, and quiet sacrifices. Of saying no to things I wanted so I could say yes to a payment that kept a roof over all of us. Compressed into one line on a court record. Request noted, the judge replied with a small nod. I will issue a written decision within the week. And just like that, it was over. No gavel slam, no shouting. Just the soft scrape of benches as people stood, the rustle of paper being stacked, the low murmur of voices returning to ordinary topics. The hearing ended the way most big things do in real life, quietly. Peter turned toward me. He gave a small nod, a professional gesture with the slightest hint of something human at the edges. Then he gathered his folder and started down the aisle. I stood and followed. The bench behind me sighed as it regained its shape. As we walked past my family's row, I let myself look at them one last time. Marcus looked pale, like someone had drained the color from his face and forgotten to put it back. His hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles white. Olivia had her arms crossed over her, chest, shoulders pulled in, lips pressed thin. The confidence she'd worn when they walked in had slipped. Mom stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the judge's bench, even though he wasn't there anymore. Her scarf sat slightly crooked now. She didn't fix it. Her hands were empty, fingers curling and uncurling against her knees. None of them spoke. None of them called out my name. No last-minute plea. No sudden, let's talk after this. Just silence. The same silence they'd used to freeze me out of group chats, birthdays, Thanksgiving dinners. Only this time, I wasn't on the outside of it. I was walking away from it. Outside, the Michigan wind hit my face as soon as we stepped through the courthouse doors. It was sharp and unapologetic, sliding under my collar, stinging the tips of my ears. The sky was a flat winter gray. Cars passed. A bus hissed at the curb. A man in a heavy coat hurried by with a coffee, eyes on his phone. The world didn't pause for my little war to end. It never does. I pulled my coat tighter. Not because of the cold exactly, but because of the sudden lightness in my chest. It felt like I had been holding a breath for so long that I forgot what it was like to breathe normally. Now, slowly, my lungs were catching up. I had been quiet long enough. Not absent, not weak, just quiet. Reading, learning, filing, saving. Now, every silence they gave me had turned into something solid. A weapon, a record, a receipt, a boundary. Every time they ignored a call, I wrote down a date. Every time they sent a threat wrapped in family language, I screenshotted it. Every time they smiled in photos without me, I poured my energy into something that could stand up in a room like the one I had just left. I walked down the courthouse steps and didn't look back. My boots on stone made a steady rhythm. The wind pushed at my shoulders, and for once, it didn't feel like resistance. It felt like a reminder. The truth is, I didn't need an apology. An apology can be taken back, twisted later, turned into, I never said that. Paper can't. I didn't need them to suddenly understand the damage they'd done. I just needed the record set straight, needed the story of what happened to exist somewhere they couldn't edit. They thought I was walking out defeated, the sister who came in alone, the daughter they joked about not being able to afford a lawyer, the one they expected to crumple under the weight of their version of reality. They were wrong. I walked out free. It took 5 days. 5 days of silence. No calls, no texts. Not even one of those cryptic Facebook posts my mom loves. No Bible verse vaguely about betrayal. No quote about loyalty. No photo with a caption about moving forward. Just radio silence from all of them. Silence used to scare me. It used to make me think I had done something wrong, that I was the problem, that if I just said the right thing or apologized first or softened my voice, everything would go back to normal. But after that hearing, the silence felt different. It felt like distance, like space, like a room I finally had to myself. On the 5th day, the envelope came. Thick, heavy. That soft, off-white paper that government buildings seem to love. My address printed in black. Their return address in the top left corner. And right there, stamped in deep purple ink, the Wayne County Circuit Court seal. I held it in my hands for a long second, just standing in the doorway. The cold air seeped in around my ankles, Michigan winter trying to crawl into the house. The mail truck rumbled away. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. My heart thudded once, hard, then steadied. I could have ripped it open right there on the welcome mat. I didn't. I walked into the kitchen, set the envelope on the counter, and made coffee instead. One scoop, then another. The sound of the beans grinding. The drip of the machine. The familiar little hiss. I moved slowly on purpose. I had rushed enough things in my life. This wasn't going to be one of them. By the time the coffee was ready, the light had shifted. Morning sunlight was starting to pour through the kitchen window, hitting the table just so. Dust floated in the beam, lazy and unbothered. This house used to feel haunted after Dad died. Too many empty chairbacks, too many memories pressed into the walls. Now, it was quiet, not haunted. Mine again. Even before the paper said so, I could feel it. I took the envelope to the old dining table, the same one my dad refinished the year after his stroke. I remember that summer, how he insisted on sanding it himself even when his right hand shook. How I stood behind him, ready to catch the sander if it slipped. How he looked up at me and said, half joking, "If this thing outlives me, you better keep it." I ran my fingers along the surface now, tiny dips where his hand had pressed too hard, a darker knot of wood near the edge. Then I picked up the envelope and tore it open, slow and careful, like the contents might evaporate if I rushed. The paper slid out with that crisp little sound legal documents make. I unfolded it and started to read. Reinstatement of joint ownership, restoration of financial stake, court order for mediation to determine compensation for my 13-year contribution. The sentences were clean, precise, no dramatics, just facts. It was all there, in black and white. Every lie undone, every silence broken, every gaslit conversation quietly overruled by ink. The house was legally mine again, not just in memory, not just in what my father had wanted, on record, in the system, in the place they thought I could never reach without them, and they couldn't undo it. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. It came out shaky and then turned into a laugh. Not loud, not hysterical. Just a small, stunned sound that rolled into the empty room and disappeared. That night, I lit a candle. Not for them. For me. I set it in the middle of the dining table, the same table that had seen birthday cakes, hospital bills, and arguments about money. I struck a match, watched the flame catch and flare, then settle into a soft, steady glow. I closed my eyes and thought about the woman who sat in the DMV parking lot crying after she saw her name removed from the deed on a printout. How I held that paper in shaking hands. The sun too bright through the windshield, people walking past my car not knowing my entire life had just been erased in one line of text. How I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and wondered if I was overreacting. If maybe they were right. If it really was just paperwork. I thought about the woman who went 3 months without air conditioning so she could afford the retainer for Peter. Summer heat pressing in against the windows. Fans humming in every room. Sweat sticking my shirt to my back as I fell asleep. And still, every time the bill came, I chose him over comfort. I chose the long game over temporary relief. I thought about the daughter who washed her father's feet in a plastic basin when he couldn't walk, while her brother updated his LinkedIn profile with new titles and new connections. How I trimmed Dad's toenails carefully, talking to him about nothing and everything, while my phone buzzed with notifications about Marcus's new job. How Dad apologized for being a burden, and I told him he was the reason that house meant anything. The candle flickered. I opened my eyes and watched the wax pool slowly, the light bouncing off the window glass. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. 2 days later, the first message came. Marcus, we need to talk. This didn't have to go this far. 9 words. No hello. No how are you. No acknowledgement that he had sat in a courtroom and watched me fight for something he knew I had earned. I stared at the screen for a moment. Old habits rose up first. Explain yourself. Soften it. Make him feel better. Then another thought cut through. This didn't have to go this far. He was right. It didn't. They could have told the truth years ago. They could have honored what Dad wrote on that shoebox lid. They could have honored the agreement we made in the kitchen with Arthur listening. But this far only mattered to him now that it cost him something. I locked the phone. I didn't respond. Silence is an answer too. Then Mom called. The ringtone that used to make my stomach flip. I watched her name light up the screen. Watched it blink. Watched it go dark. A few seconds later, the voicemail icon appeared. I pressed play and set the phone on the counter. Danielle. Her voice was tight, a little shaky. I don't know why you'd go behind our backs like this. We're family. You embarrassed us in court. There it was. Not grief, not regret, not, I'm sorry, just embarrassment. Shame that the story had wandered outside the family group chat, that a judge had heard it, that other ears had listened. She paused on the recording like she expected me to jump in, even there. Then the message ended. No, I love you. No, call me back. Just the weight of what wasn't said. I deleted the message, because that's the part they never understood. I didn't want revenge. Revenge tries to hurt back. I didn't want to hurt them. I wanted record. I wanted reality to be recognized, finally. Out loud. In public. On paper. I wanted my father's trust in me to live somewhere they couldn't rewrite. That night, I walked through the house barefoot. The floor was cool under my feet. The boards creaked in familiar places, the same way they did when Dad would sneak to the kitchen at midnight for one more slice of pie. The walls held shadows, but they didn't feel like threats. They felt like memories that had finally been defended. I passed the shelf in the hall where the yellow Sears shoebox sat, the one with Danielle's half written across the lid in thick black marker. I looked at it for a long second. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I knew what was inside. I had carried that box into Peter's office. I had watched him scan every page. I had watched a judge consider what those crumpled slips meant. Every receipt was already counted. Every hour spent. Every sacrifice weighed. And now, respected. The next week, Marcus sent an email. The subject line made me huff a quiet, humorless laugh. Let's settle this privately. Like the public part had been my choice. Like calling a lawyer and going to court was the first move in this game. In the body of the email, he wrote, "We're willing to offer a payout to avoid further court costs. We, not I. Not Mom and I are sorry, just we're willing." As if generosity had suddenly bloomed in their hearts, instead of fear. I didn't answer him. I forwarded it straight to Peter with no comment. The email felt lighter once I'd sent it away, like I had dropped a heavy bag at someone else's feet. His reply came fast. "They're worried. Don't fold. I've got this." 4 short sentences. That was all I needed. Not just because he was my lawyer, but because his words matched what I felt in my bones. And I did have this. Not because of the money, the payout, the mediation, whatever numbers would eventually land on another set of papers. Those mattered in a practical sense. Bills do not pay themselves. But the real shift had already happened. They thought silence was weakness. They thought my quiet meant I was lost. That if I wasn't yelling, I must be confused. But silence had given me space. Space to build, to strategize, to prepare, to learn how to speak a language they assumed I'd never bother to understand. They stole my name off a legal document with ink and signatures I never saw. I wrote it back, line by line, law by law, with evidence and patience and the help of people who knew. The system they weaponized. They thought I had no lawyer. The judge thought otherwise. They assumed no one would stand beside me, that I'd show up alone and stay powerless. But I stood. Alone at first, and then with someone at my side who believed my story enough to put his name under mine on court filings. Alone, and still undefeated. And here's the truth no one tells you. Justice doesn't arrive with fireworks. There's no choir, no dramatic music, no slow clap. It's quiet. It's a file folder being stamped. It's a clerk sliding a document into the right place. It's a name being re-added where it should have always stayed. It's a line in a database changing from 1 to 2. It's walking through your own front door and knowing, deep in your bones, that no one can take it again without a fight they now know you are willing to bring. I see now I never really lost my home. Not the way they wanted me to think I had. The memories were still mine. The nights on the couch with Dad watching late shows. The mornings making coffee while he shuffled to the table. The evenings fixing things he insisted on trying to fix first. Those had always been mine. What I reclaimed was the part of it they tried to erase. The part that said I belonged here on paper, not just in photographs. The part that said I was not a guest in my own story. That I was not temporary. That my care had value. And no, I don't forgive them. Forgiveness is not a requirement for freedom. I don't wake up angry every day. I don't sit around plotting ways to make them pay. I just don't hand them a clean slate they haven't earned. I don't pretend it didn't happen. I don't minimize what it took to stand up. I'm not carrying their guilt. I'm carrying my keys. I feel them in my hand when I come up the walkway. The weight, the familiar clink. I slide the key into the lock, turn it, and step into a house that knows my footsteps. A house that, despite everything, still holds the echo of my father's voice, the scent of old coffee, the soft creak of the dining chair he always pulled out first. This time, when the door closes behind me, it doesn't sound like something ending. It sounds like something finally, fully mine. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.